I was walking down the street in the city of Będzin, Poland, and I was completely terrified. The year was 2001. I was 28 years old, and I had told everyone in my life, my friends, my family, my boyfriend, my bosses, that I was going to find the family that had rescued my mother as a hidden child during the Holocaust. But if I'm honest, I didn't have a lot to go on, and I was really scared I'd come home empty-handed and have to tell everybody that I failed. I had a couple of clues. One was a photograph my mother had given me that was taken of her right after the war. She was a little girl sitting in this photograph between her father and a dark-haired woman who she thought maybe was Honorata Skowrońska, the woman who had saved her life. She wasn't sure. The second clue I had was an address, 20 Malchowskiego Street, which was the last known address we had for this family. But that address was the second reason I was so scared that day, because 20 Malchowskiego Street was the house that my family owned before the war. Which is to say that if by some miracle this family was still living in this house, they hadn't paid rent in nearly 6 decades. I didn't think they'd be too cool with the granddaughter of the landlord rolling up and being like, hey. So I thought they'd come to the door with a shotgun, you know. I had a couple of friends with me, Polish friends who were there to translate, moral support, and I said, listen, the first approach is crucial. We have to be careful. Like, let's not draw too much attention. But of course, they didn't listen to me. We get to the house. It's a walk-up apartment building, small building, and they immediately start knocking on doors. They're knocking on doors, they're knocking on doors, and I'm like, come on, guys, let's hang back. And then we find out that the family I'm looking for, in fact, still lives in this house. And before I can say or do anything about it, I'm standing on the second floor on a landing in front of a door that has a tag next to the doorbell that says Skowroński, the name of this family. Only now it's not just me and my 2 Polish friends. Oh, no. I mean, they'd knocked on a bunch of doors, and it's not every day that some American Jew turns up looking for the family that rescued her mother. So now there's like 10 people crowded into this pretty small stairwell landing. We're like an invading army. And then, you know, and I'm like, oh my God, this is really bad. And when we ring the doorbell and nobody answers, I'm incredibly relieved. I'm like, this is perfect. I'll write a nice little non-confrontational letter. I'll tell them, you know, I don't want their house. I just want to meet them. But one of these neighbors is like, no, they're home. I'd been studying Polish for like 3 weeks, so I think that's what he said. He kind of goes through, and then he starts to pound on the door. He's like, boom, 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 and then he's yelling, Skowroński! Maszkoshi! That means you have guests. And he is pounding, and he is screaming, and I am having an absolute heart attack. This is the biggest disaster I could ever possibly imagine. And then the door opens, and a confused older man emerges. I see blue eyes tucked into soft creases. The eyes are blinking as though this man had just been sleeping. And then everybody starts talking. My friends, these neighbors, and they're just like going in Polish and da-da-da-da-da-da, and I pick out a handful of words. I hear the word for mother, baby, war, and then everybody is pointing at me and saying, Córka, daughter. This is the daughter of the baby who lived with Mrs. Skowrońska. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. So I reached into my bag and I pulled out the photograph of my mother as a little girl between her father and a dark-haired woman. I handed the photo to this man who started. To moja matka, he says, pointing at the woman. That's my mother. And I pointed at the little girl in the photo and said, I to moja matka, that's my mother. And he took me in his arms and he started to cry. She was my sister, he told me. He was 12 years old the day his mother came home with a baby in a blanket and said, this is your sister. If anybody asks you who this is, you tell them that this is your sister. And he had taken care of her. He had changed her diaper, he had made her pancakes, and then at the end of 1945, she left, and he never heard from her again, and he didn't know if she was alive or dead until that day in 2001 when I showed up on his doorstep. How is she doing? Is she alive? Can you bring her to Poland to see me? He asked through the translators. And I said, and that was when I did something that I would later live to regret. I looked up at this man, and with tears in my eyes, I promised him that no matter what it cost me, I would bring my mother to Poland and these two would meet again. As fate would have it, it didn't work out that way. Our destinies didn't quite play out the way I wanted. But at least in that moment, I was thrilled to know that he did not open the door with a shotgun. Thank you.